Look at this guy, a lack of education driver. LOL. Bob, a guy from my elementary school, scoffed at me at a matchmaking party. My name is John. The guy who looked down on me was Bob, a classmate I've never been fond of. Since 3rd grade, Bob always used to harass me. Bob's family was pretty wealthy, and he always flaunted it. I wasn't feeling the matchmaking party that day. It was my day off, and I was enjoying a leisurely stroll in the city for the first time in ages. Then, to my surprise and not exactly desired, Bob, whom I hadn't seen in a while, approached me saying, "Hey, isn't that John?" Then, he desperately explained that they were one person short for the party that day, and I reluctantly ended up joining him. Bob works for a top tire company and seems to travel abroad often. All the ladies at the party were flight attendants, each a knockout. I was dressed in casual everyday clothes since it was my day off. Bob was all suited up, making me feel like I was just there to set him off. However, that party turned out to be a turning point in my life. The last time I had met Bob was when I was 18. It had been nearly a decade since I'd seen Bob. Sure, back then, I was a truck driver, but now, things have changed. This goes back to my childhood. I was an only child, and my mom worked as an office worker. I was really close to my grandma, who lived behind us. In preschool, I was a lively and mischievous kid, and it seems I was quite cheerful in elementary school too. I don't remember much from those days, but that's what my mom told me. Bob used to come over to my place a lot. We'd enjoy playing video games together, and I'd go over to his place too. We were good friends until one day in the 3rd grade when he began to harass me. That's when my dad passed away from cancer. My mom and I were at the hospital every day during his sickness. I remember the doctor asking me, "What's your name?" "I'm John." "John, huh? Make sure you work hard at your studies," he encouraged me. After my dad passed away, I lost all my energy and became quite introverted, but I didn't forget the doctor's words and started to focus on my studies. Around that time, my maternal grandma said to my mom, "Rent must be tough. Why don't you and John come live with me?" "That sounds good," my mom said, and that's how my mom and I ended up living with my grandma in the house behind ours. My grandma's house was old, and Bob visited once, but the next day at school, he said to our classmates, "John's house is so old and poor looking. If you go there, you'll catch his poverty." After that, nobody would play with me, and I was always studying alone. I was isolated at school, and during lunch, no one talked to me. Everyone was gathered around Bob, engrossed in conversations about games. One day, my grandma said, "Your birthday's coming up soon, John. I'll buy you a new game." But I shook my head and said, "Grandma, can you buy me some study guides instead?" My grandma was surprised. "John, are you studying so hard because you have a dream?" "Yes. I'm gonna be a doctor," I said, and both my grandma and mom were surprised. "That's great. If you like studying, would you like to go to tutoring school?" Grandma suggested. Maybe because we saved on rent after moving, my mom supported the idea too. After that, I lost interest in games and started attending tutoring school 4 days a week. In the higher grades, Bob started attending the same tutoring school. Even there, he'd say, "Isn't your family too poor to send you to a place like this?" And everyone at tutoring school looked at me. I felt like I was doing something wrong. Eventually, I quit tutoring school. Everything just started to feel unbearable. My mom was working late nights, and my grandma would cook dinner for me, but I had no appetite. I holed up in my room, exhausted and sleeping. I skipped school the next day too, and eventually became a truant for a while. My grandma was concerned about my health and took me to the hospital, but there was nothing wrong with me. It was just a severe feeling of lethargy. Knowing I was physically okay, my grandma was relieved, but I still holed up in my room. Thinking I shouldn't worry my grandma and mom too much, I forced myself to go to school a few times, but then Bob in my class said loudly, "Hey, John, so you quit tutoring too, huh? Poor people can't help it, I guess. And hey, aren't you always wearing the same clothes? Can't afford new ones." Everyone in the class laughed mockingly. It's not that I couldn't get new clothes if I asked, I just wasn't into fashion. School became even more unbearable, and I became truant again. Around that time, my mom's sister, Aunt Linda, suddenly moved in with us and started resting in another room during the day. My grandma's house was old but spacious, with plenty of rooms. I later found out that Aunt Linda couldn't have kids and her husband had left her for another woman, and she apparently returned home following their divorce. Aunt Linda seemed to be suffering greatly from mental distress. My mom used to say things like, she graduated from a prestigious university and worked at a top company. Hearing that, I asked her, Aunt Linda, could you teach me? I'd love to learn from you. She hadn't smiled in a while, but she smiled at me. Why do you like studying but don't go to school, John? I hate school, I said. Aunt Linda seemed to be deep in thought, and the next day, after going out for the first time in a long while, she brought home a mountain of study guides and dropped them on my desk with a thud. All right, where should we start? Aunt Linda said. I started with the studies of my current grade. Whenever I stumbled, Aunt Linda would help me out. Even while being truant, my studies progressed rapidly. Aunt Linda, too, gradually started to feel better than when she first arrived. Still, she continued to visit the psychiatrist and was on medication. It seems both my parents had a great love story when they married, and Aunt Linda did too. The inability to have children must have been incredibly tough for her. Looking back now, it wasn't just about not being able to have kids, but also the betrayal by her husband must have been truly painful. Amidst all this, Aunt Linda started helping out with the housework at Grandma's place. I barely attended elementary school before moving on to middle school. I didn't feel happy at all. From the first year of middle school, I was again in the same class as Bob. Bob's harass continued in middle school as well, but I decided to just go to school for the sake of studying. Maybe because of Aunt Linda's excellent teaching methods, even the French class seemed easy. I had been living a nocturnal lifestyle for a long time, and I would often doze off during class. The teacher would scold me, and everyone, led by Bob, would laugh. However, I topped the class in the tests. I never fit into group life, always being the odd one out. I would head straight home and once again receive private lessons from Aunt Linda. Math was fun too, and I was already studying topics from the third year of middle school. Then I moved on to studying at a high school level. One day, Bob said to me, "You just come to school for the free lunch, right? Being poor and all, you can't play games, so you've got nothing to do but study at night, huh? Being top of the class and all," he said sarcastically. Everyone in the class was excited about games and club activities. Neither of those interested me. I was isolated in middle school too. I wondered why school was so boring. Despite this, my days of thinking this way continued. Still, my mom was happy that I wasn't truant. In my second year of middle school, a girl confessed her feelings to me, even though I was like this. Come to think of it, it was Valentine's Day. I began chatting with her via email after I gave her the cell phone number that my mom had gotten for me. She wanted me to teach her, so I visited her house. She was a quiet girl, but her mom was kind and welcoming. I would do homework with her and then head home. Her dad wasn't around, and her mom was a nurse, mainly working night shifts. On Sunday afternoons, we occasionally met up at the bakery in the supermarket, spending our allowances. I would sometimes accompany her while she shopped for clothes. Additionally, after sending a message to Aunt Linda about helping with grocery shopping, I enjoyed doing the shopping with her. She usually wore glasses with her school uniform, but on days off, she switched to contact lenses and looked really stylish and cute. Having no interest in fashion, I let her pick out clothes for me within my budget. Aunt Linda would tease me, saying, "John, you're looking quite handsome these days." And we would laugh. After dinner, I continued my high school level studies with Aunt Linda's help. One Saturday, while going out to eat hamburgers with her, we ran into Bob and some classmates. Bob said, "Look, it's the poor kid and the glasses girl. John, is she treating you today?" So I replied, "Bob, you can say what you want about me, but she has a proper name. Call her by her last name." Bob retorted, "Did she even have a last name? Probably no one knows it. But hey, she's not wearing glasses today," and then he left. She said that Bob was notoriously unpleasant but didn't seem bothered by it. Then, in our third year of middle school, she told me she was going to a private high school and that her mom was getting remarried, and they were moving, so she transferred schools. We kept in touch by email for a while, but as she got busy with tutoring school for entrance exams, our communication naturally faded. The class atmosphere shifted as we all started focusing on the high school entrance exams. I was no longer in the same class as Bob, but I could hear him and other classmates talking about applying to private high schools during lunch break. I was looking forward to finally getting away from this boring group life. My mom asked, "John, which high school are you going to?" I'm not going to high school." "What?" My mom was surprised, and Aunt Linda was too. I said I wanted to work and ended up working at a nearby construction site. The senior workers were strict. Upon reflection, I realized I wasn't very physically strong and was bad at sports. Both my mom and Aunt Linda said it would be better to at least get a high school equivalency, and Aunt Linda told me about the high school equivalency exam. The construction site was tough, but better than the dull life, and I could withstand the yelling of the seniors. On rainy days, when work was off, Aunt Linda helped me study thoroughly. My grandma was still energetic and didn't say anything about the path I chose. "I'm happy as long as my grandson John is healthy." Grandma was as kind as she always had been. With my first paycheck, I bought a smartphone and a computer, gave my mom $4,000 for living expenses, and took the whole family out to eat. I took a family photo with my smartphone. Everyone had their best smiles. Then, I worked hard in the summer, getting tanned and sweating. I adjusted my night owl tendencies and became accustomed to the job. I played some games on the computer at night, chatted with online friends, and went to bed early. Aunt Linda said that at this rate, I'd probably pass the high school equivalency exam, so I took it and passed at the age of 17. But instead of choosing desk work, I got my driver's license when I turned 18. While looking through magazines at a convenience store, I came across a job listing for a nearby driver position and decided to switch jobs. Driving was less stressful in terms of human relations and quite relaxing. I was physically fit and worked with a smile. Feeling a bit hungry, I stopped by my usual convenience store. There, I ran into the last person I wanted to see, Bob. "Hey, you're a driver now." Poor guy couldn't even go to college. "Maybe you couldn't even finish high school." "Yeah, Bob. Long time no see." "That's right. I hate school," I said and quickly left him. That evening, I got a call on my smartphone from Aunt Linda. I stopped my truck and called her back. "John, calm down and listen. Grandma has collapsed. She's in the hospital now." "Got it. I'll come as soon as I can. Please email me the location," I said and called my company. After delivering the last of the cargo, I headed to the hospital. By the time I arrived, it was too late. It had been a sudden heart attack. My mom and Aunt Linda were in tears. Grandma had slipped into a deep sleep and would never wake up again. Grandma, who was always kind to me, had a peaceful look on her face, smiling slightly in her sleep. The next day, Mom bravely organized a small family funeral, and we tenderly brought the smaller urn with Grandma's ashes back home. Then, Grandma was laid to rest in Grandpa's grave. There, amidst the sounds of cicadas, a single sunflower stood tall and proud, just like Grandma, always smiling, and tears streamed down my face. Mom took about a month off work. After some time, we began to clear out Grandma's house. Mom, with the help of a lawyer, reviewed the contents and found Grandma's will and addressa. When the lawyer checked the contents, it detailed the inheritance for Mom and me from Grandma. Grandma had sold some farmland in the countryside for a considerable sum. With that money, Mom demolished the old house and turned it into a parking lot, creating a passive income for herself and Aunt Linda. The house where I had lived since elementary school. The room where I became a recluse. That's right. After Dad passed away, I had told Grandma I wanted to become a doctor. Mom, Aunt Linda, and I moved into a 3 LDK apartment, and Aunt Linda was delighted with the system kitchen. It seems Mom bought this apartment with Grandma's inheritance. It's close to Mom's office. Aunt Linda had fully recovered and was taking care of all the household chores. I lay in bed in my new room, staring at the ceiling. Ever since elementary school, when my dad passed away and went to heaven, I lost all motivation to do anything. However, I deeply respected the doctor who took care of him until his last moments. And then, Grandma, who preferred buying me study guides over video games and encouraged me to go to tutoring school. My mom, who worked hard all by herself, and Aunt Linda, who taught me so diligently. Though I was isolated at school, I realized I had been supported by many people throughout my life. This made me think that I could achieve the dream I had as a child. Now, with grandma's inheritance, I could afford to go to college. I discussed it with my mom and Aunt Linda, and then respectfully left my job. I asked Aunt Linda to help me review high school level studies once more. I had saved up quite a bit from working, so I tried to give some money to Mom for living expenses, but she refused to accept it. "John, I support your dream," Mom said. I talked with medical professionals online, learning specialized terms. Then I took the medical college entrance exam. I thought if it didn't work out, I would look for another job. If I stayed positive, anything was passable. Remembering my times at the construction site and as a driver, it was a shot in the dark, but to my surprise, I passed. Even I was astounded. Mom and Aunt Linda celebrated by ordering steak for us. During my college years, I made a friend named Ken. "Why do you want to become a doctor, John?" "Well, my dad died of cancer a long time ago, and the doctor who took care of him was really kind. I've admired that since elementary school." "I see. We're quite similar. In my case, it was my mom's doctor who was a great person." "I get that." We talked like that, and though I was a year late starting college, I took my time studying without rushing and started tutoring online at night. Teaching seems to help me learn better. However, there were times I stumbled, and during those times, I sought help from Aunt Linda. In my memory, my dad was a very kind and earnest man. I continued to work part-time during the summer breaks and earnestly earned my credits. Sometimes, when I was totally exhausted, I'd go out to the city with Ken. Even though I'm not much of a drinker, I would have lively conversations with my friend Ken at the pub. Once, I got so drunk I surprised my mom when I came home. But I was really happy. For the first time in my life, I had made a friend at school, which I used to hate. Ken and I encouraged each other, and we both earned our medical licenses. I was 25 at that time. Then, I became an intern at a university hospital. Aunt Linda, healthy and energetic, started going to a simple job at a nearby factory in the mornings. Our entire family became busy with their own lives. Ken also became an intern at a general hospital and was doing well. At 27, I started working as an internist at the university hospital. My dream had come true. However, being a doctor is a very busy job. Ken worked as a surgeon. During my first surgery, I was drenched in sweat, but I was overjoyed when it was successful. Patients' families thanked me, and on my rare days off, I went out drinking with Ken, leading a fulfilling life. Our schedules rarely matched, but Ken and I kept in touch through email. We're so busy, it's hard to even think about having a girlfriend. Yeah, maybe we'll meet someone eventually. On a Wednesday after a training session, I decided to take a leisurely walk to a bookstore. It was a scorching summer day. Suddenly, a man in his 50s collapsed right in front of me. I immediately rushed over to him. His heartbeat felt a bit fast, and I called for an ambulance. I suspected he'd stroke as he was unconscious, and it seemed dangerous. I accompanied him in the ambulance to the nearest general hospital. The man received emergency treatment and regained consciousness, and a nurse came out to inform us. It was indeed heat stroke. I stayed with him in the hospital room until his family arrived. The man was still a bit dazed, but seemed to be regaining consciousness. He looked at me and murmured, "Is this a hospital?" "Yes, it seems you've suffered from heat stroke," I responded. Just then, a very beautiful woman appeared in the room. "Thank you for helping my father. My name is Emily. I'll thank you properly later." "No need for thanks. I'm a doctor. I only did what's expected of me," I said and was about to leave. She asked for my name, but I mentioned that it was registered at the reception and left in a taxi to go home. Then, my busy days began anew. I received a call from her, expressing her gratitude. Life was a whirlwind of activity. I usually spent my days off mostly sleeping, but as it got a little cooler, I decided to visit the Buckstoo in town again. While walking through the streets on my day off, I ran into the last person I wanted to see. "Isn't that John?" Bob, is that you?" "Hey, long time no see." "Still rocking the cheap casual look of a poor guy, huh?" said Bob, always fond of backhanded compliments despite it being a long time since we last met. "Got the day off today. Hey, if you're free, I need a favor." "Yeah, It's my day off. What's up? I've got a matchmaking party planned, but one guy just bailed last minute. Would you mind joining? It's on the house, of course. A matchmaking party, huh? I'm not exactly dressed for it, and it's so sudden. Please, man. You always had a knack for making nasty comments about me, remember? Really? Was I like that? Sorry then. I'll make it up to you by treating you tonight. Well, if I'm just sitting there, I said and walked into a fancy Italian restaurant. We arrived a bit early, and it seemed like Bob had ordered for us as drinks were served first. Then, a group of 3 beautiful women walked into the restaurant. One of them looked familiar, but I meet so many people every day, I couldn't place her. According to Bob, all the women were flight attendants, all dressed in suits or elegant dresses. Bob started talking non-stop to them. You know, I work for a top-tier company, travel abroad a lot. I met one of these ladies during my travels and managed to get her to spare some time for today. As he said this, the 3 women introduced themselves by name. I felt somewhat out of place. Sorry, ladies. Both guys we planned with couldn't make it last minute. I bumped into this guy in the street and asked him to join. He's a lack of education, LOL. We've been classmates in elementary school. Bob had mentioned one person bailing, but there were 3 women. Another one of Bob's lies, I guessed. And just like that, Bob looked down on me again. Ignoring him, one of the women recognized me and exclaimed, "John, what are you doing here?" Miss Thompson, you know this guy. Know him. He's the man who saved my father's life. What? I finally remembered. She was the daughter of the man who had suffered heat stroke. Oh, from that time. Yes, that's right. Bob, why would you say he's just a driver? I just met him after a long time, and since he was always poor, I thought he was working as a driver after dropping out of middle school. What? John is a doctor at a university hospital. What? Emily, I just happened to be off today. I was on my way to a bookstore when I bumped into Bob, and he suddenly invited me here, I explained, causing a stir among the women. A doctor? This guy, a doctor? No way. Yes, he saved my father, and I've been to the university hospital a few times to thank him, but John's always been too busy. John, a doctor at a university hospital. Bob, I'm currently an internist. No way, I can't believe it. The room went silent. After a while, Bob, usually talkative, quieted down, and the women started to engage me in conversation. I nodded along and enjoyed the meal. After that, I left the scene. Bob had taken care of the payment. Later, I received an email from Emily. I was happy to bump into you the other day. I know you're busy, but would you like to go out for dinner sometime? She had written. Emily, too, was busy due to her job, but we somehow managed to set a date and went out for dinner for the first time. I chose a family restaurant over a fancy one, which would be less tiring for me. During the dinner, Emily asked me to start dating her. Her father worked for a foreign company and seemed to be busy too. Understanding each other's busy schedules, we gradually deepened our relationship through occasional dinners and movie outings. Emily had lost her mother at a young age and was raised by her father alone. I shared my family situation with her. She visited my house and met my mother and Aunt Linda, who were delighted. After a year of dating, I proposed to Emily, and we got married. Despite our busy lives, we supported each other and shared household chores. One day while shopping with Emily, we bumped into Bob. John, what's up? You know, that matchmaking party was my idea. Unlike you, Bob, who judges people by their education and job, John is completely different. Bob froze, and we ignored him and continued shopping. Ken had also found a girlfriend. Although finding time for a wedding was difficult, we were planning to have a ceremony when both our schedules allowed, inviting Emily's father too. During this time, Emily became pregnant and gave birth to a lovely daughter. I was moved to tears by the arrival of this new life, reminding me of my isolated student days. We built a house near my mother's apartment and started living there, making it a multi-generational home with Emily's father. Emily quit her job to focus on parenting, but Aunt Linda also came to help, and my mother cried tears of joy at the sight of her first grandchild. Emily's father was utterly smitten with his granddaughter. Our daughter was born in summer. In our small front garden, a single sunflower bloomed proudly, just like today. Memories of my father and grandmother's smiling faces came to my mind. Now, I live happily with my family. I felt as though my father and grandmother had always been supporting me. I am grateful for the unexpected encounters in my life and have vowed to protect many people as a doctor.